Welcome back, everybody. Hope everyone's enjoying the last week of the baseball season. Obviously, my team's been long since out of it. We do play Arizona, so it could have an impact a little bit on the wild card chase here. Although last night didn't start off too well, but I'll be tuning in the next 2 days just to see how they're able to kind of finish the season. And I'm even going to the last game of the season on Fan Appreciation Day when they play San Diego, so I am looking forward to that, and I hope you guys have your team still in it. Before I kind of jump into things real quick, I'm sorry that I haven't been able to put as much content in the last couple weeks. I've been preparing for another marathon, so it's coming up next month, so I'm looking forward to be able to run that and then have a little bit more time to do some more content creation thereafter. Looking forward to going to another card show in November. It's going to be the Chicago Sports Spectacular here in Chicago, so that's going to be a big event for me when I get a chance to do that. And as always, I'll be keeping up with my Diamond Star stories, as well as complete set presentations, and doing some live streams. I think our next live stream is going to be coming up next week with RJ, and we're going to have a very special guest joining us that you are all familiar with. So I look forward to kind of putting that information out there for next week. I think we're going to be doing it on Tuesday, and we're going to be covering my favorite vintage set that I've completed to date, which is the 1972 top set. So looking forward to kind of sharing those cards with you and some of my memories of putting the set together, as well as information about the 1972 top season, or 72 baseball season. Well, on that topic, actually one of the players featured in that set, unfortunately kind of just passed away yesterday, Brooks Robinson. Brooks Robinson was a player that was my favorite player when I was a kid, even though I never saw him play. Only because of the fact that I was actually, my very first T-ball team was the Orioles, and they're asking us who our favorite players were, so it had to be an Oriole, and my dad at that time was able, through a connection with somebody that he worked with in his Baltimore office, knew the secretary for Brooks Robinson. So he presented me with a couple autographs from Brooks Robinson, one of which I'll kind of show you here in a minute. And that was my first kind of introduction to Brooks Robinson. And at that time, I thought he was still an active player, but he wasn't. This was in the early 80s, so he'd been retired for a few seasons. But from everything that I've ever read or heard, and a lot of the testimonials coming out after his passing, really indicate that he was a high-class guy in addition to an all-time great at his position. And he's going to be really missed, and he's definitely one of the players that I've really kind of looked up to and admired from the vintage era. So I'm just going to show you a couple things for him too as I kind of turn the camera around, and then we're going to go into this awesome pre-war mail day that I have to share with you here. So give me a minute and I'll turn the camera around. All right, so I turned the camera around now. I'm going to show you off some things that got picked up in the mail, but first I wanted to just kind of point out that this was the very first autograph I ever received. I think I featured it on the channel too when I first started the channel over a year and a half ago, where I had a few autographs I wanted to be able to show off of players that my dad helped me get when I was a kid, including like Michael Jordan. So if you go back and look at that, I think this is featured in there. So in this photograph, he signed over his facsimile autograph, so it was really kind of hard to read it. But I also have a poster that he signed, which I can't really display because I have only rooms where there's a lot of sunlight. And it's a poster from the 1980s with an autograph from the 1980s, so you know it's going to be sensitive to fading if I ever display it. But this one has been really worn over the years. I think I put it up in my room a few times, but you could definitely see that it was well loved, and I displayed it a lot as a kid. I'm happy to have it in my collection, and I also then wanted to kind of transition and point out that one of the very first vintage cards I ever got from my family, I think my parents picked this up for me probably shortly after I got my very first vintage card, which was a Hank Aaron card from 1970 in a trade. They got this one for me for probably a birthday. I think it may have been for Christmas, if I'm not mistaken, sometime in the mid-80s. And it was a 1965 Topps Brooks Robinson card. This one's definitely on my list to be able to get encapsulated at some point, just out of nostalgia only. It's got a little bit of wear because I've definitely played with it over the years and probably didn't treat it as I probably should have. So it's probably no more than like a good 3 or 4, but it definitely is a card that I really admire and love from his years in baseball. All right, so let me go through the mail day real quick. I'm going to show you the only non-vintage card I got, and this is from my 2001 Topps project, the Topps Gold project, and this is actually the Josh Hamilton card from the Traded Series. This is still when he was a prospect with Tampa. I really like those actually training jerseys they got there with the all green tops and the green cap and the gray pants. I think they look pretty sharp. Definitely he's a player that I think is pretty well documented. His struggles have been, and just how talented he was when he was at the best of his game, and just how many demons he had when he was struggling with substance use. So I hope he's able to kind of turn his life around. I saw that, his conviction or allegation of child abuse, he did eventually get convicted on a lesser charge thereafter from, I think, 2019. So I'm hoping he's able to kind of turn his life around, just out of empathy for a human being. All right, so I got a few things to show you here. They're all going to be, and you'll like this, they're all going to be from the 1930s. And they're all going to be from the same set except for one card. So I will move some things around. I'm going to need another stand at some point to be able to kind of add this in. So I'm going to have to take one card down. So I'll start with chronological order. We have, these are all Diamond Stars. This first one is Johnny Vergas. Johnny Vergas had a brief period of time in baseball. He played for a few seasons. I believe he's pictured here with, if I'm not mistaken, maybe the Philadelphia Phillies. That is correct, and they talk on the back of his card about the art of doing the hook slide, which you rarely ever see utilized in baseball anymore. This was a PSA 2, which is fine for the set that I'm putting together. This is a 1935 edition of the card, and it was part of the series that was originally released in 1934, but this is the reissue in 1935. So we got good old Johnny Vergas here, and over here. The next one came with actually a note, which I think is pretty cool. So let me talk about the note first, and I'll show you the card. The note was from the seller. It was actually sold over eBay. He was talking about this as one of his favorite sets. Really enjoyed the poses and the color just as I do. Said he hopes that I enjoy it just as much as he did, and he owned this particular card for over 20 years. Actually ended up reaching out to him after he sent me this note, not just to give him feedback, but just to thank him for the personal note. Turned out he was a collector for 65 years, and this was one of the sets that he was working on in that time. So really cool story, and I would like to be able to kind of extended the invite for him to kind of join me in a live stream at some point. Haven't heard back from him, but it'd be really kind of cool to hear from a collector of that collected for that long, and probably obviously had an opportunity to actually maybe even run into some of these players as they were still alive in their later years if he was an autograph collector. So I don't know, that'd be kind of cool to hear some of those stories. So this is actually Glenn Myatt, who's a catcher. As you can see, this lovely catcher pose is kind of an action pose. You can see he's flipping off his Mace mask here, and it's traveling to the ground, as evidenced by the additional lines they added to the mask to kind of imply movement. What I really like about this card, in addition to all the catching gear and him kind of fielding a pop-up, is the American flag here back in the background, and the level of detail that had to be put in to put the stars and the stripes, and also the flagpole that kind of then is behind him there. So I just think it's really kind of something that kind of pops out to me as I look at this card, because some of the cards don't have that fine of detail at times, and this one is pretty stellar as you kind of look at it here. Clearly he got it graded more recently because it's a more recent PSA holder, but he had the card for 20 years, which is really kind of cool, and it came out as a 4. It's got a mark on it somewhere, and I think there's some marks on the back here if I'm not mistaken, probably just little dots of ink that kind of got on there over the years if I'm not mistaken. Came again from the 35 series. It's card number 58, so I'm happy to be able to have it in my collection. He actually had a pretty decent career. I think he played on a couple All-Star games too. We'll talk more about him as we get into featuring him in a later date. Another card I picked up was a Fred Frankhouse. So Fred Frankhouse was a pitcher for many years. Here he's pictured, I believe, with the Boston Braves. Pretty happy to be able to pick this one up. It's in a 6OC and an older PSA holder. But you can kind of see that it actually has really good registration with its color, despite it being off-center. And it's very clear being able to read on the back, which I really like, because some of the backs are so faded in some ways, or just have so much accumulation of dirt from the years, it's kind of hard to read them. This one is very easy to be able to read. It's card number 62 from the Diamond Star set. So I'll put it over here in the background. All right, then we have, I'll save this next one for last because it goes with my other 1930s item that is not a Diamond Star. But we'll go ahead and feature the Luke Appling card, which I showed briefly last week. This one I'll kind of go a little bit more in depth in. This is this 1936 Diamond Stars. He only was released in the 1936 series. So this is his only edition. So his cards are going to be a little less in production than some of the guys who are featured in 34, 35, and 36, which makes it a little bit more rare, but it's not an overly rare card. I think there's a few hundred that have been graded by PSA, and I'm sure a few more have been by SGC, and some are still out there that haven't been graded. What I really love about this card, again, in addition to the colors, you can see the White Sox emblem here and the White Sox hat. This is like his, more or less his third major release card. In addition to the 34 Gaudy, I believe there's also a, they're kind of called heads up. I forgot what they're called, but there might have been the heads up card. I can't remember what they're called, but it was like the cards where you were able to bend them in half, and the players would be able to kind of stand up on little stands. You make little stands out of the cards. They were kind of like punch out cards, but he has one of those from 34. But this would be like his third major issue release card, and I think in my mind the most colorful of like the three cards from the batters ups. That's what they're called, of the three cards from that era. And you have obviously the pitcher warming up in the background over here, clearly a left-hander, and somebody holding a bat in the background, maybe providing like some level of feedback to the pitcher as he's warming up. And Luke Appling's obviously probably approaching maybe the batting cage. Let's say what he's doing, kind of getting ready for a game there. This is also from a season where he led the American League and was second in the MVP rate. MVP vote. He led the American League with a .388 batting average, which is one of the highest averages that was recorded since the beginning of the live ball era. So great item, great all-time White Sox. Happy to be able to have it in my collection here. All right, so the next guy is going to be, the next two items are related. So I meant to pull out the one that kind of went with it, but we'll just kind of go with it for now since I didn't grab it. So Wes Ferrell. Now, Wes Ferrell is a player that pitched for a variety of teams during the course of the 1930s. He was a very effective pitcher during his time, but he was also known to be a hell of a hitter. So Wes Ferrell, one of the things he did were kind of unique at the time, where he was primarily a pitcher that also could really hit. I know Babe Ruth was a pitcher that could also hit, but then predominantly became an exclusive outfielder and rarely pitched thereafter. Well, Wes Ferrell obviously did both during the course of his career, and often would be like a pinch hitter in certain situations. Wes Ferrell and his brother, better known brother, Rick Ferrell, played together on the Boston Red Sox for many years and were a battery mate because his brother Rick was obviously a catcher. They're both featured in this set. Rick's in the Hall of Fame. Wes is not. He's got a career WAR right around 60, so he's one that's come up a few times in consideration. But he is not a Hall of Famer. But it's someone that probably should be reconsidered and often isn't because of his temper. And the next card that goes with it was a 1936 Gaudy. This is the wide pen version of the 36 Gaudy, so these are a little oversized card, and it's got he and his brother on the card. This might have been one of the first card releases where you have multiple players on there. There's also a Joe DiMaggio with his manager McCarthy at that time. That's probably a much more famous edition of this set. I picked this one up because I'm actually going to be doing, this is a preview for the next Diamond Star series. We're going to be doing a feature on Wes Ferrell and also Rick Ferrell, and just generally talking about the careers of the Ferrell brothers. So that'll be the next one. It'll probably be coming up in maybe the next few days, and I'll be working on that and getting it out for you at the beginning of next week. So hope you guys enjoy this, and you guys have a lovely evening.